What do little boys who like to build erector sets do when they grow up? They buy a boat so they can build even bigger erector sets. Hi, I'm Ron with Amazing Mile Marker Stops, and in today's how-to video we're going to show you how to install a holding tank on your boat. Here, and they're spaced every. Previously on Amazing Mile Marker Stops, we show you how to replace the valve cover gasket on a Ford Lehman 135. When we bought Elixir about 6 years ago, there was no holding tank on this boat. It did have a Coast Guard approved treatment tank, so we weren't dumping raw sewage over the side, but we had no capacity to hold any sewage for any amount of time, so our range of travel was prohibited or limited by where the no discharge zones were. As soon as you cross in North Carolina, you're in a no discharge zone. The Florida Keys are a no discharge zone, so we could only travel between those two areas. As soon as I could, I installed a Raritan hold and treat system, which gave us a 15-gallon holding capacity, but we quickly learned that will get you through the no discharge zone in North Carolina if you just travel straight through it. It won't let you stay there, and it won't let you go down to the Florida Keys unless you're going to go 3 miles out every day to dump the contents of your tank overboard. Obviously that's just not doable. So I finally decided we needed a bigger holding tank, and so I'm going to show you how I installed this 60-gallon holding tank. I decided to place our new holding tank above the port side fuel tank. Initially, when this boat was built, the fuel tank went all the way up to the right underneath the floor to the salon, and was a 300-gallon fuel tank. As they often do, they apparently leaked, and the previous owner cut it out and replaced it with this little bitty 75-gallon fuel tank, which isn't great for range, but it gave me a place to put the holding tank. Now, you want to make sure that this holding tank, wherever you put it on your boat, and it'll be different for everybody, so don't necessarily copy my erector set configuration here, but if you're lucky enough, you can put it right down flat on the deck, but wherever you put it, it needs to be well supported. I'm installing a 60-gallon holding tank, and fully loaded, that's going to weigh, I don't know, 600-700 pounds. So you want to make sure whatever you do can support it. So as you can see, I've run this thing every which way but loose to give it plenty of cross support and support. I've checked the stats. This is 14 gauge metal, so it will support the weight that I'm going to put on it, but I wanted to make sure, so I put every opportunity I had. If there was anything I could tie into, I tied into it just to make sure. Now out here, there's going to be 2 studs going there, just like this one here, and down there's a stud. So these 2 studs I can't put in place until I slide in my deck and then the holding tank on top of it, and then I'll lift these up once I put the stud in and bolt them to a bracket that'll be mounted to the stud, just like this one here. There you can see I've placed my deck in. Of course, again, these will come up to better support it when I get the studs in, but the deck's generally in place. I've left it loose because I'm gonna need to probably move it around to get to things until I'm done. This is the holding tank I'm getting ready to install. As I said, it's a 60-gallon holding tank. You can buy these in a lot of different places. There's a lot of companies that make them, and a lot of companies that you're familiar with that sell them, like West Marine, Defender. But I bought mine from Marine Sands. It's out of Washington. Not to say it's better or worse than any other place, but the reason I went with it is they had a huge selection of sizes that you could choose from, so I was easily able to find the right size for my situation. And when you buy them, there's no fittings on it, and you tell them exactly where you want the fittings, which is another thing I like, is you get to pick and choose where your fittings are, how many fittings, what size of fittings. Now when you design where to put your fittings, bear in mind, like the vent needs to always be running uphill so that it never gets clogged with anything, allow the air to ventilate. So you want that to be as short a run as possible. And you know, you need to take into account the pump out fitting down below has to get to a deck access somewhere. So just bear all that in mind when you design it. But like I say, that's what I liked about Marine Sands, was I got to pick exactly where I wanted what fittings and how many. And they spin weld them in. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but now that I've got it and I've looked at it, I can tell that there's no way they can leak around where the fitting is attached to the tank. It's like it was molded on there at this point, so you don't have to worry about any future leakage there. Another thing I like about these tanks from Marine Sands, and not to say they're the only ones to do it, but they do it, is that there's no seams on the edges. They're not connected, glued, whatever. It's a one-piece mold, so there's no way this will ever leak. When you order your tank, you can also order these tubes. It's an additional price, but it's not unreasonable. They're cut at the end so that when they touch the bottom, they won't seal up, leaves it open. And the purpose of this is you hook up your pump out line to one of these. You want to put Teflon tape on your threads there, and then it just goes in the hole. And from that point, it fits a regular plumbing fitting, but they include this as part of the tube that comes with it, so you just glue that in. You can put it in any direction you want. And then this piece right here is a tailpipe that 1.5 inch hose will fit over, and then you just clamp it down. I like this much better than the barb. This is one of the things Marine Sands says is why they use this. If you get a barbed fitting, which I have in places already on the boat, and then you have to change that hose out, it's a nightmare to get that hose off of the barbed fitting. You pretty much have to cut it off. And if all you're doing is maintenance, rerouting, whatever, you're not actually going to replace the hose, cutting it off makes you have to replace the hose. So with this, it'll just slip off, and this is never under pressure, or at least it shouldn't be under pressure. So the barb really isn't necessary. So I like these tailpipes that they include with their kit. Now, all this comes as one price. Okay, as you can see, we've got the holding tank installed. I don't think it's going to collapse under its own weight or the weight of what you put in it. So the next step is we've got to secure it. You definitely don't want that sliding around while you're underway. So we're going to find a way to tie this thing down and make it solid. Well, I got everything secure. Tank is solid. It's not moving anywhere, up, down, or otherwise. I screwed the deck in from underneath to the angle iron that it's sitting on, and then I threw 2 straps, cinch straps, over the top. They're hooked onto angle iron on the other side, and they hold it down tight. And then at each end I put some angle iron that's holding the tank from sliding forward and backwards. So I don't think it's going anywhere. Now it's time to plumb it, and then we'll be ready to use it. So we're going to get it plumbed and get her up and running. Once you decide where you want your pump out fitting to go, and drill it with a hole saw. And when you drill your hole, you want to make sure it's pretty close tolerance to your diameter. And the reason for that is you really don't have a whole lot of clearance between the housing and where your screw goes. So you want it as tight as possible. The further you come out away from this housing, the less your screw is going to grab. So we're good to go. And after carefully selecting where you want your hole to be, look at the inside, look at the outside. Once you drill this hole, there's no going back.
She's officially on her way to the bottom of the ocean.
Go ahead and drill your hole. Then dry fit your fitting. Make sure it fits. Looks good. All right, we've started to get our plumbing in place. A few things I want to point out to you. One, I recommend using PVC pipe instead of the hose as much as possible. This hose right here I installed about 2 years ago, and it's already leaching odors into the cabin. I've never lived in a house that had PVC pipe leach odors, so I'd rather go with PVC as much as I can. I know there's some people disagree with that, but to each their own. One thing you want to know about PVC though, or even if you use the hose, you want as few bends as possible. Every bend causes friction, so you want to try to keep it as straight as you can, which I did with this one. You're not always able to do that, so as you can see with the one over there, I've got a lot more bends on it. You don't even want to see what I had to do to get to the forward head. That's the from the toilet to the tank, and so I kind of had to go everywhere to get there. This is the pump out going to the new deck fitting we installed, and you can see that's for the vent, which I haven't installed yet, waiting on a part for that. Another thing I want to tell you about using PVC is boats flex, as you know, so you don't want to make this line rigid the whole way. You want at least some portion of it to be hose. So you can see from here I connected on up to through the deck fitting is hose. That gives flexibility, because the boat flexes, you need your line to flex too. Plus the deck fitting isn't made to fit PVC to it. You've got to have some portion as hose anyway. So just to keep your pipe from cracking, always have at least one end that has some hose on it to give you flexibility. Also, there's some amount of flexibility in the line. Try not to make it too rigid. Again, that's not a reason not to use too many elbows. The more you use, the more rigid your pipe becomes, and the more likely it'll crack. if your boat flexes. When you put your hose on, what I prefer to do is design it to where instead of bringing my PVC over here and having to straight up with an elbow there going straight up to the deck fitting, I end it over here so that I've got this nice sloping grade to my hose. And the reason for that is when you go to pull the hose off, if you've ever worked with this stuff, you know how rigid that hose is. And if you're straight up and down and you're trying to pull it off either end, it's not going to want to compress to let you get it off of the fitting. So if you have this slope in here, this bend in here, then when I go to pull it off either end, it doesn't matter, I'm pulling this way, which is just flexing the hose versus trying to compress the hose. So always leave your end your PVC to where you can put that bend in the hose. Well, one of the benefits that you get is you get to learn from my mistakes. When I had this tank designed, I had them put in a 3/4 inch vent. I thought that would be sufficient because other holding tanks that I'd seen on other boats either had a 1/2 inch vent or a 5/8 inch vent. So I thought 3/4 inch was beefy. After I got the tank and started doing some additional research, I discovered I was wrong. 3/4 inch isn't even sufficient. Neither is the 1/2 inch or 5/8 that most tanks have. In fact, since I've had this tank designed, our existing 15-gallon holding tank on the boat, the macerator pump quit sucking anything out even though it was running, and it kept blowing the fuse. In troubleshooting it, I discovered that the 5/8 inch vent line on that tank had gotten clogged up, and so when the tank was full and it was the macerator pump was trying to suck everything out of it, it couldn't because of the air vacuum created inside the tank. So it's kind of like if you suck on a straw and you put your finger on the other end, your cheeks squeeze in but nothing happens. So that just really drove home to me that I need to have a beefier, bigger vent on this holding tank. So in researching, I found that really you should have 2 1.5 inch vents, and you should run one to either side of the boat. The way my tank is situated, I can't do that. I can't get a vent to the other side of the boat without a whole lot of routing around corners, and the more bends you put into a vent line, the less effective it is. So I'm going to go with a single 1.5 inch. That'll still be a lot better than the 3/4 inch. I didn't have a hole drilled for an 1.5 inch line. So I drove around town to find out how do I solve this problem. And I found this little critter that's called a bulkhead. It's a bulkhead fitting, and it's made to drill a hole through an existing tank. It's threaded on this side for a 1.5 inch fitting to screw into it, and then you put it through your hole, and then on the inside of the tank you put this nut and this washer. There's a gasket built into this side of the fitting. You screw it down tight, and this is actually reverse threaded, so as you're screwing your 1.5 inch, you're tightening it versus loosening it. So it all looked good to me. I bought it. I measured across that threaded area to determine what size hole I need, and it was a 3-inch hole. So all excited that I'd solved my problem, I took a 3-inch hole saw and drilled a hole in the tank. Problem was, this didn't fit through my access hole that I had installed in the tank when I had it manufactured, which was a 3-inch access hole. So this won't go in it. I can't get to the back side to tighten this down, so this is totally unusable. And now I've got a 3-inch hole in my tank. So that presented quite a problem. What do you do about it? So I went researching online and I found this thing. It's called a Uniseal, and it's pretty thin, not much to it, but luckily for me, this is for a 2-inch PVC pipe, and it happens to use a 3-inch hole. Wow, I got lucky on that one. And all you gotta do is plug this into the 3-inch hole I've already cut in the tank, and then you shove a 2-inch pipe into here. I'll reduce it down to my 1.5 inches, and it should work. Alright, so here we go. This is our Uniseal, and we're going to put it in the hole. And it just pops in real easy. No problem. Next, I've got my 2-inch elbow, and I glued a short tailpipe onto that, just enough to clear the Uniseal. I don't want to go too deep into the tank because I want air along the surface. And then I put a reducer. All that's assembled, and I just had this pipe stuck in there right now just to help me know my angle. So we're going to see how it goes in. Alright, that's not working too well. So I'm going to see about lubricating this. I saw online that sometimes if you lubricate the Uniseal, it'll help the pipe go in. Okay, to lubricate the hole, I'm just going to use a little bit of dish soap, just to make it where the pipe slides a little bit easier. Alright, it took some doing, but I finally got that Uniseal in and the fitting installed. Every video I looked at online as to how to install a Uniseal, they just put it in there and shoved the pipe on in. A couple of them used some lubricant on the seal to get the pipe in, but every one of them, they just put the pipe in. Mine didn't go in so easy. I'm not sure why. It is real cold outside, but I am heated inside the boat, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But in case you had the same problem, I'll tell you what I did. I finally popped the Uniseal out of the tank and sat down with a screwdriver and pried it onto the tailpipe that I've got going in there. And it took some doing, but I finally got it on there. Now you're not going to be able to stick the whole assembly in, because that's how it seals, is by pushing out the seal as the tailpipe goes in. So with the tailpipe in, you can't now stick it in the hole in your tank. But I left it on the pipe for a couple of hours, and then when I pulled it off, it had expanded enough to where after I put the Uniseal in the hole in the tank, I was finally able to get the pipe into the Uniseal. It still wasn't easy, but at least it was doable. So if you have that problem, you may try the same thing. Once I got that in there, I installed the rest of the piping on up to the through hole. With the vent, it's very important as you install it that you don't have any dips in the line. So it doesn't matter if you go continually up or continually down. You just don't want any dips. And in my case, you can even see that I go continually up to this point here, and then it goes down. That's okay, because the whole point is if you get water in it, whether through condensation, rain, or you fill your tank too full, you just want that water to be able to drain. So if water gets in here, that side will drain out, this side will drain down in the tank. In either event, I won't have water sitting in the pipe creating a seal, and that's what you want to prevent. Alright, I got everything hooked up. This is the toilet here that I'm hooking up. This is in the V-berth forward head. I've got a dividing wall here, and I've lifted the deck to the V-berth, and you can see how convenient this is. It's right there. So everything's done. We should be ready to flush the toilet and test it, and we'll see what happens. Alright, the moment of truth. We're going to test it out, flush the toilet, and see what happens. If you'd like to help us make more of these videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps more than you know. And don't forget to check out the nation's largest free online travel guide for boaters, AmazingMileMarkerStops.com. And like us on Facebook. And remember, don't just cruise.
Visit Amazing Mile Marker Stops.